She's nothing but a fat wallet with legs. I can't wait to drain every penny and dump her. That's what I heard my future daughter-in-law whisper to her friend in the garden just 2 hours before our rehearsal dinner. They giggled like schoolgirls, sharing a secret. My son had no idea he was about to marry a predator. I finished my bourbon, set the glass down quietly, and began planning exactly how I would expose her. If you're watching this, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. This is the story of how I saved my family from a professional con artist. It was the third Saturday of October, and the maple trees along our property had turned that deep crimson color that makes New Hampshire look like a postcard. I was 63 years old, the proud owner of Callahan Timber and Lumber, a company my father had started in 1962, and I had grown into one of the largest privately owned lumber operations in New England. We supplied wood to construction companies across 6 states. Our equipment yard alone was worth $8 million, and the 200 acres of forest land we owned had been in our family for 3 generations. My son, Michael, was 31 years old and had been working beside me since he graduated from Dartmouth with a business degree. 3 years ago, I made him co-owner of everything: the company, the land, the equipment. I wanted him to feel the weight of responsibility, to understand that Callahan Timber wasn't just a business. It was our legacy. That evening, we were hosting the rehearsal dinner at our estate, a converted farmhouse that my late wife and I had renovated 20 years ago. The property had a wraparound porch, a detached barn we'd turned into an event space, and gardens that my wife had planted before she passed from a heart attack 4 years ago. Michael was engaged to a woman named Vanessa Clark, a 30-year-old marketing consultant he'd met at a charity gala 18 months earlier. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and had swept my son off his feet faster than I thought possible. I'd had my doubts about Vanessa from the beginning. Something about her felt rehearsed, like she was always performing. But Michael was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time since his mother died. So I kept my concerns to myself and tried to welcome her into our family. That night, I had stepped outside to get some air. The barn was full of guests, laughter and music spilling out into the cool autumn evening. I walked toward the old stone wall at the edge of the garden, where my wife used to plant her roses, when I heard voices coming from behind the hedgerow. I recognized Vanessa's voice immediately. That smooth, confident tone that always seemed just a little too polished. 18 months of pretending to love that boring lumberjack, and I'm finally about to cash in. She laughed. His father's company is worth millions. The land alone could sell for $20 million to the right developer. Once I'm married and get Michael to sign a few things, we'll own half of everything. Her friend's voice was amused. And Michael doesn't suspect anything? Michael is clueless. He's so desperate for love since his mommy died. It's pathetic, really. He believes every word I say. Last week I convinced him that prenups are a sign of distrust. He actually apologized to me for his father bringing it up. More laughter. What about the old man? Vanessa's voice turned cold. Richard? He's suspicious. I can tell. But he won't say anything because he doesn't want to hurt his precious son. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. I'll have my name on everything, and there's nothing he can do about it. You're brilliant. You know that? I've done this twice before. Old families with money are always the easiest targets. The sons are usually lonely. The fathers are too proud to admit they've been fooled, and by the time anyone catches on, I'm already gone with a nice settlement. I stood frozen behind that hedgerow, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands were trembling. Every instinct screamed at me to march over there and confront her, to drag her in front of everyone and expose her lies. But I was 63 years old, and I'd learned long ago that the best revenge isn't hot. It's cold. It's methodical. And it's devastating. I straightened my jacket, composed my face, and walked back to the party like nothing had happened. I smiled at guests, shook hands with Vanessa's parents, even raised a toast to the happy couple. No one noticed the storm building behind my eyes. That night, after everyone had gone home and Michael had driven Vanessa back to her apartment in Manchester, I sat in my study surrounded by photographs. Michael as a baby. Michael and his mother at his high school graduation. Michael signing the partnership papers at Callahan Timber. In every photo, he was smiling, trusting, innocent. I poured myself a scotch and called a man I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Ed Patterson had spent 25 years with the FBI before retiring to run his own private investigation firm. We'd met when he helped me track down a former employee who'd been stealing equipment and selling it across state lines. Ed was thorough, discreet, and had connections in places most people didn't even know existed. Ed, it's Richard Callahan. I need your help. Richard, it's almost midnight. Must be serious. It's about my son. I think he's about to marry a con artist. There was a long pause. Tell me everything. I told him what I'd overheard. Every word, every laugh, every detail. When I finished, Ed was quiet for a moment. That's bad, Richard. Real bad. But a conversation isn't proof. Any lawyer would tear it apart. We need documentation, records, pattern of behavior. Then find them. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. Give me 10 days. The next morning, I drove to Michael's apartment in Concord. He lived in a nice building near the State House, the kind of place a successful young businessman should live. Vanessa had been staying there more and more often, and I noticed her car in the parking lot. Michael answered the door in jeans and a flannel shirt, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Dad, what brings you by? Want some coffee? I sat at his kitchen table while he poured 2 mugs. The apartment was filled with wedding planning materials, seating charts, vendor contracts, fabric samples. A large calendar on the wall showed a countdown. 12 days until the wedding. Son, I said carefully, I need to talk to you about something important. His expression shifted. If this is about the prenup again, Dad, we've been over this. Vanessa was really hurt that you brought it up. She feels like you don't trust her. It's not about the prenup. Last night, I overheard Vanessa talking to her friend in the garden. I told him what I'd heard. The words, the plans, the laughter. When I finished, Michael was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. A mixture of disbelief and anger. That's impossible. You must have misunderstood. Michael, I know what I heard. She called you desperate. She talked about draining our family's money. She said she's done this before. He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his coffee. Dad, I can't believe you would make up something like this. Vanessa loves me. We're getting married in 12 days. I'm not making anything up. I'm asking you to wait. Just a few weeks. Let me look into her background. Look into her background? His voice rose. She's not a criminal, Dad. She's the woman I love. And I'm not going to let your paranoia destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me. Michael, please. Everything I'm doing is because I love you. If you loved me, you'd be happy for me. You'd trust my judgment. He walked to the door and opened it. I think you should leave. I paused at the doorway. I'm not giving up on you, son. Even if you don't believe me right now, I will protect this family. He closed the door without responding. I drove home with a weight in my chest that I hadn't felt since the day we buried my wife. My son thought I was paranoid, jealous, maybe losing my mind with old age. And maybe he would keep thinking that until it was too late. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Over the next 10 days, Ed Patterson worked around the clock. He followed Vanessa to her office at a marketing firm downtown, to her lunch meetings, to her evening activities that she told Michael were client dinners. He dug into her past, her finances, her social media, her relationships. Meanwhile, I went about my normal routine at Callahan Timber. I supervised logging operations, met with clients, signed contracts, but every night I sat in my study, waiting for Ed's calls. The first breakthrough came on day 3. Richard, I found something interesting. Vanessa Clark isn't her real name. She was born Vanessa Kowalski in Ohio, changed her name legally 6 years ago after a civil lawsuit that was settled out of court. My stomach tightened. What kind of lawsuit? Still digging. Give me more time. Day 5. Another call. She's got a man on the side, name's Derek Hoffman, works as a real estate developer in Boston. They've been meeting at a hotel in Portsmouth every week for at least 8 months. I've got photographs. I closed my eyes, feeling sick for my son. Keep going. Day 8. The call I'd been dreading and hoping for at the same time. Richard, You need to see this in person. I found her previous victims. We met at a small diner off Route 101, the kind of place where truckers stop for coffee and nobody asks questions. Ed slid a thick folder across the table. Vanessa Kowalski. Before she was Vanessa Clark, she targeted a family in Cleveland. The father owned a chain of auto repair shops. She dated the son for 14 months, got engaged, convinced him to add her name to the family business accounts. Within 6 months, she'd transferred over $400,000 to offshore accounts and disappeared. I opened the folder. Inside were police reports, court documents, bank statements, and photographs. Vanessa, smiling at a wedding that never happened. Vanessa, on vacation, with a man who wasn't my son. The son had a complete breakdown, Ed continued. Attempted suicide. He's been in and out of psychiatric facilities ever since. The father spent $200,000 trying to track her down, but she'd already changed her name and moved on. He pointed to another document. Before Cleveland, there was a family in Indianapolis. Manufacturing business. Same pattern. Seduce the heir, gain access to the finances, disappear with everything she could take. She nearly bankrupted them. The mother died of a stress-induced heart attack 6 months later. I felt my hands trembling. This woman wasn't just after money. She destroyed lives. She left broken families and shattered people in her wake. There's more. Ed pulled out a USB drive. I managed to get a recording of a phone call between Vanessa and her boyfriend Derek. You need to hear this. He plugged the drive into his laptop and pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the diner, casual and confident. Everything's on track. The wedding's in 4 days. Once we're married, I'll get Michael to sign the loan documents for the business expansion. His father's already put everything in Michael's name, so I'll have access to all of it. Derek's voice was amused. And the old man? Richard? He's suspicious, but he won't do anything. He's too worried about hurting his son. These family men are all the same. They'd rather lose everything than admit they were wrong. When can we be together for real? Give me a year to bleed them dry. We're talking $20 million in assets, maybe more. The lumber company, the land, the equipment. Once I've got my half in the divorce, we can disappear to anywhere we want. I love you, baby. I love you too. Just a little more patience, and we'll have everything we deserve. The recording ended. I sat there, frozen, staring at the laptop screen. Ed collected his materials. That's what you're dealing with, Richard. A professional predator. She's done this before, and she'll do it again unless someone stops her. I paid Ed for his work and drove home with the evidence locked in my briefcase. The question now was what to do with it. I couldn't simply show Michael. He hadn't believed me before, and he might claim the recordings were fabricated. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed him to see the truth with his own eyes. The next morning, I called my attorney, Margaret Chen. Margaret was 65 years old, sharp as a tack, and had handled Callahan Timber's legal affairs for over 20 years. She'd also been a close friend of my late wife. Margaret, I need your help with something unusual. I explained everything. Margaret listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she let out a long breath. That's quite a situation, Richard. What's your strategy? I want to set a trap. Something that forces Vanessa to reveal her true intentions with witnesses present. Margaret was quiet for a moment. There might be a way. If we can get her to commit fraud on the record, we'd have grounds for criminal charges. But it's risky. If she suspects anything, she'll disappear like she did before. I'll take that risk. We spent the next 3 days planning. Margaret drew up documents for a fake investment opportunity. A major development company supposedly wanted to buy 500 acres of land adjacent to our property to build a luxury resort and golf course. Callahan Timber would serve as the exclusive lumber supplier for the entire project. The deal would require Michael and his spouse to sign as co-guarantors, putting up the family land as collateral. I called Vanessa directly. Something I rarely did. Vanessa, it's Richard. I've been thinking about our conversation at the rehearsal dinner, about how you wanted to be more involved in the family business. I could hear the surprise in her voice, followed by barely concealed excitement. Really? I'm so glad to hear that, Richard. I just want to be part of the family. I have an opportunity I'd like to discuss. A big one. but it needs to stay between us for now. I want to surprise Michael. Can you meet me at the office tomorrow morning? Absolutely. I'll be there. The next morning, Vanessa arrived at Callahan Timber headquarters wearing her most professional outfit, her most charming smile. I led her to the conference room where Margaret was waiting with a stack of documents. Vanessa, this is Margaret Chen, our corporate attorney. She's here to explain the deal. Margaret laid out the fake investment, the resort project, the lumber contract, the projected returns. Vanessa's eyes grew wider with every number Margaret mentioned. This sounds incredible, Vanessa said, barely containing her excitement. What do you need from me? Since Michael will be your husband in 3 days, and you'll be part of the family business, we need your signature as co-guarantor. It's standard practice for married couples in business partnerships. Of course. I'd be happy to sign. I slid a folder across the table. There's one more thing. The development company wants assurance of our commitment. They're asking for collateral. What kind of collateral? The land. All 200 acres. We'd need to put it up as security for the project. I watched her carefully. Any normal person would hesitate, would ask questions, would want to understand the risks. Vanessa just smiled wider. That makes perfect sense. Big opportunities require big commitments. When can I sign? We'll need Michael's signature too. Can you bring him in tomorrow? Consider it done. She left the office practically glowing with anticipation. That evening, I made one more important call to a man named Robert Patel, whose son had been one of Vanessa's victims in Cleveland. We'd connected through Ed's investigation, and Robert had been waiting 5 years for a chance at justice. Robert, it's Richard Callahan. She took the bait. His voice was thick with emotion. You really think this will work? I'm going to need your help, your testimony. Are you willing to come to New Hampshire? I'll be on the next flight. For my son, for all the families she destroyed, I'll do whatever it takes. 2 days before the wedding, everything fell apart. Or rather, everything came together. Michael called me at 7 in the morning, his voice strange and distant. Dad, can you come to my apartment? There's something I need to show you. I drove to Concord faster than I should have. When Michael opened the door, his face was pale, his eyes red like he hadn't slept. I found something. He led me to the kitchen table, where papers and photographs were spread everywhere. Vanessa left her laptop open last night. She was in the shower, and I saw an email from someone named Derek. I couldn't help it. I started looking. I sat down heavily, looking at the evidence my son had uncovered. Bank statements showing accounts in the Cayman Islands. Emails between Vanessa and Derek planning their future together. Photographs of them in places Vanessa had told Michael she was working. And documents. So many documents. Previous identities. Previous victims. The entire blueprint of her operation. She's been planning this for almost 2 years, Michael whispered. Before she even met me. There are notes about our company, our finances, our family. Like I was a target from the very beginning. I reached across the table and gripped my son's hand. I'm sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. You tried to warn me. You tried to tell me, and I didn't listen. I called you paranoid. I threw you out of my apartment. You were in love. You wanted to believe the best in her. There's no shame in that. What do we do now? I squeezed his hand. Now we make sure she never does this to another family again. The next morning, we met with Margaret and a prosecutor named Janet Morrison. Janet was a fierce woman in her 50s who had built her career taking down white-collar criminals. We laid everything out. The recordings, the photographs, the documents from Ed's investigation, the testimony from Robert Patel and other victims, and the fake investment documents that Vanessa had eagerly agreed to sign. Janet reviewed the evidence with cold efficiency. This is solid, very solid. Miss Clark, or Kowalski, or whatever she calls herself, has established a clear pattern of fraud and criminal conspiracy. If your son is willing to cooperate, we can arrest her on multiple counts. Michael nodded firmly. I'll do whatever it takes. There's one thing I want, I said. I want to be there when it happens. I want to see her face when she realizes it's over. Janet smiled thinly. I think we can arrange that. The arrest happened on what was supposed to be the day before the wedding. We'd arranged for Vanessa to come to the Callahan Timber office to sign the investment documents. She arrived dressed in an elegant white suit, looking every bit the successful businesswoman she pretended to be. I was waiting in the conference room with Michael and Margaret when she walked in. She froze when she saw us all sitting there, something flickering behind her eyes. "Richard, Michael, is everything okay?" "Sit down, Vanessa," I said calmly. "Or should I call you by your real name?" The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." Michael stood up, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "I found everything. The emails, the bank accounts, the photographs of you and Derek. I know about Cleveland. I know about Indianapolis. I know what you've been planning to do to my family." For a moment, Vanessa's mask cracked. Real fear flashed across her face. Then she tried one last desperate play. "Michael, baby, whatever you think you found, it's not what it looks like. Someone is setting me up. Your father never liked me. He probably fabricated all of this." "The FBI doesn't fabricate evidence," Janet Morrison said, stepping into the room with 2 federal agents behind her. "Vanessa Kowalski, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and theft by deception. You have the right to remain silent." As they handcuffed her, Vanessa looked at me with pure venom in her eyes. "You think you've won? This isn't over." I walked over to her slowly, stopping just a few feet away. "Yes, it is. You've been preying on families for years, destroying lives, breaking hearts. You thought you could do it again. But you made one mistake." "What's that?" "You underestimated how far a father will go to protect his son." They led her out of the building. Through the window, I watched them put her in the back of a federal vehicle. Michael came to stand beside me, and I put my arm around his shoulders. "I'm sorry, son." He shook his head. "Don't be sorry, Dad. You saved me. You saved our whole family." The trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed every day. Victims and their families had traveled from across the country to see justice finally served. Robert Patel testified about his son, now 34 years old and still struggling with depression and trust issues 5 years later. "She didn't just steal our money," he said, his voice breaking. "She stole my son's ability to believe in love. She took something that money can never replace." A woman from Indianapolis testified about her mother, who had died from the stress of watching her family's business collapse. "My mother built that company from nothing. 40 years of hard work, destroyed in 6 months by a woman who smiled to her face and stabbed her in the back." Michael testified last. "My son stood before the jury and described how he had been manipulated, deceived, and used, how he had pushed away his own father because he wanted so desperately to believe in the fairy tale. She made me choose between her and my family," he said, his voice steady. "She isolated me, gaslit me, made me doubt my own father's love. That's something I'll carry with me forever." Vanessa sat at the defendant's table, stripped of her designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Her boyfriend Derek had taken a plea deal and testified against her. Her carefully constructed world had completely collapsed. The verdict came on a Tuesday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in federal prison with full restitution to all victims. As the bailiffs led her away in handcuffs, Vanessa turned to look at me one last time. I met her gaze without flinching, without gloating, without saying a word. I didn't need to say anything. We both knew who had won. After the trial, Michael threw himself back into work at Callahan Timber with an energy I hadn't seen in years. He worked alongside me every day, learning parts of the business he'd overlooked before, building relationships with employees who had known him since he was a child. One evening, about 6 months after the trial, we sat on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the sun set over the hills. The maple trees were starting to turn green again, and the air smelled like spring. "Dad," Michael said quietly, "I never properly thanked you for not giving up on me, for fighting even when I pushed you away." I took a sip of my bourbon and looked at my son, the same boy I'd taught to fish in the stream behind our property, the same young man who'd graduated at the top of his class, the same partner who would one day carry on our family's legacy. "That's what fathers do, son. We protect our children, even when they don't want us to, even when they can't see the danger themselves. He nodded slowly. I keep thinking about what could have happened if you hadn't overheard her that night. If you hadn't investigated, she would have taken everything. The company, the land, 3 generations of our family's work. But she didn't. That's what matters now. Michael was quiet for a long moment. I'm not sure I'll ever fully trust someone again. Not like I trusted her. I put my hand on his shoulder. You will. Not right away. Maybe not even soon. But one day, you'll meet someone real. Someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have. And you'll know the difference because you've seen what the lie looks like. 2 years later, Callahan Timber won the contract to supply lumber for a massive development project in Vermont. 300 new homes, a community center, a school. Michael led the project from start to finish, coordinating with dozens of contractors and suppliers. At the groundbreaking ceremony, the governor mentioned us by name, calling Callahan Timber a shining example of New England craftsmanship and family values. I stood at the back of the crowd, watching my son shake hands with officials and pose for photographs. He caught my eye across the crowd and smiled, a real smile, not the desperate happiness he'd shown during his engagement to Vanessa. This was the smile of a man who had been through fire and come out stronger. I smiled back, my heart fuller than it had been in years. The sweetest revenge wasn't watching Vanessa led away in handcuffs. It wasn't hearing the guilty verdict read aloud. The sweetest revenge was watching my son reclaim his life, stronger and wiser than before. I learned something through all of this. Trust, once broken, can heal. It takes time and patience and a lot of hard work, but it can heal. And love, real love between a parent and child, can survive anything. It can endure lies and manipulation and betrayal. It can wait through anger and disbelief and hurt. In the end, that's what saved us, not the evidence or the lawyers or the federal agents. It was the love between a father and his son, a love that no con artist could ever understand and no scheme could ever destroy. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. I hope it reminds you to trust your instincts, protect the people you love, and never let anyone take what your family has built. If someone in your life seems too perfect, too charming, too eager to get close to your family's money, pay attention. Sometimes the only person standing between a predator and their victim is someone who refuses to look away. God bless you all.